Have you ever noticed that when we talk about pirates, pretty much the same image pops into our heads? I recently learned that the specific image of a pirate we have in our minds appeared thanks to a tiny period in history. I mean, literally this small, just 10 years at the beginning of the 18th century. It was precisely in this decade that the black flag with the skull appeared, along with the most famous pirates in history. It was then that the eye patch, the wooden leg, and a hook for a hand became inextricably associated with piracy. But why? After all, pirates have existed for thousands of years, and they still exist today. In the time of ancient Rome, for example, pirates even managed to kidnap Caesar, received a ransom for him, and let him go. True, they were later caught and executed, but that's not the point. Who today knows what ancient Roman pirates looked like? Or take the Somalis. Just 10 years ago, these guys were actively robbing ships in the Indian Ocean. Have you seen kids at parties in Somali pirate costumes? No. We all know exactly what a real pirate should look like. And that's what the pirates of the Caribbean were like in the early 18th century. Since then, generations of people, including you and me, have perceived pirates only in this way. But what did the pirates of the Caribbean do that was so special at that time? Why did they never bury treasure? What did the black flag really mean? In this video, we'll talk about the life and death of a real pirate of the Caribbean. By the way, spoiler alert, many of them were gay. Let's imagine we're watching a film about the pirates of the Caribbean, but not a wholesome fantasy from Disney, but a realistic, R-rated movie with blood, violence, and rock and roll, because that's how it really was. True story. So, the year is 1716. Ahead lies a decade that historians will call the golden age of piracy. Of course, this couldn't have happened overnight. Here's a brief backstory. Starting in the 16th century, the Caribbean islands and the coast of America became the epicenter of trade connecting Europe, Africa, and America. Merchant ships transported sugar, tobacco, coffee, precious metals, and slaves. All of this generated huge profits for the 5 leading colonial powers of the time: England, France, Holland, Spain, and Portugal. Trade exploded and pirates followed. By the 1720s, piracy reached its peak. The generation of pirates from that decade caused a real global crisis. By rough estimates, the total number of pirates in the world at that time was 5,000. Never in history, before or since, has their number been greater. Those same 5 leading trading powers suffered the most from the rise of piracy. Of course, the authorities weren't just sitting on their hands. They took decisive action. First and foremost, piracy became one of the most serious crimes. And the court didn't have a choice like 5 to 15 years. No, the only possible punishment was the death penalty. The authorities tried to make every sentence as public as possible, gathering as many people as they could. The port was often chosen as the location for such shows. This was no accident. There were many sailors there, and it was to them that the authorities tried to get a simple message across. If you try to do something similar, you will be hanged. Many sailors sympathized with pirates, and it was members of this profession who most often filled the crews of ships with black flags. That is, the sailors knew they would eventually be caught and hanged, and yet they still became pirates. It's like, where's the logic? Surely some of you thought they were just greedy and wanted treasure, but that's far from the truth. Most pirates didn't make a fortune or bury it on some distant island. To understand why many sailors, often very good and experienced ones, became pirates, let's look at the life of an ordinary sailor in the early 18th century. He was a young man, around 27 years old, of humble origin. He had 3 potential places of work: a naval ship, a merchant ship, or a slave ship. It's hard to grasp today, but at that time, a ship was super-duper technology, cooler than space rockets are today. In the early 18th century, ships could transport hundreds of tons of cargo from one continent to another. Moreover, they carried several dozen cannons. These kinds of ships were the main tool for the development of global capitalism. England, France, Holland, Spain, and Portugal had the most impressive fleets at the time and were global superpowers. But the life of an ordinary sailor who operated this super technology was incredibly hard. First of all, it meant long voyages, low pay, and bad food. Sailors back then even had a joke that their food could run away. On a long voyage, keeping provisions fresh was difficult, as they had no refrigerators. Consequently, the food quickly spoiled, and all sorts of creatures would infest it. On top of that, there was harsh discipline. Beatings were a common practice for maintaining order. A special whip was used for punishment, the so-called cat o' nine tails. It was made from ship's ropes, with a handle and 9 tails, each with special knots at the end. When struck, these knots would rip out a piece of skin. The whole crew was brought out on deck to publicly punish a sailor for one infraction or another. Hundreds of lashes, or even 1,000 if it was for something serious, like an attempted mutiny. Not everyone survived such punishments. In general, the mortality rate among sailors was very high. Sailors died young. On average, the professional life of a sailor at that time was short, 7 to 8 years on a ship. 7 to 8 years before he would die in battle or from beatings or catch a disease like malaria. This is precisely why many sailors willingly joined the pirates. Life on a pirate ship was organized completely differently. This is Bartholomew Roberts, or Black Bart, one of the main rock stars of the golden age of piracy. With his crew, he robbed over 400 merchant ships in just a few years. Thanks to him, we know today how life was structured on a pirate ship. Most pirates preferred small, maneuverable ships. They could hold a crew of 80 men and 10 cannons. This was more than enough to attack and rob merchant ships. Attacking warships in such a situation was unwise. Only superstars like Bartholomew Roberts could afford that. His ship had a crew of several hundred men and almost 50 cannons. The main difference in the organization of pirate ships from naval or merchant ones was that pirates elected their captain. In those days, when the poor had no rights, and most sailors came from these social strata, pirates could choose their own authority. Having a choice is generally a nice thing. In addition, a special person was elected to supervise the captain to ensure he did not abuse his power. Any pirate at any moment could gather everyone on the main deck and ask who wanted to elect a new captain. If a majority of hands went up, a new leader was chosen. Easy. An unusual approach was also applied to the division of loot. For example, on a naval ship, the difference in pay between a captain and an ordinary sailor could be 100-fold. On a pirate ship, no one in the crew received a fixed salary. Everyone had a share. All the loot was divided more or less equally. The captain or sailors with important skills like navigation might receive more. Their share was 1.5 to 2 times larger than the others at most. In short, a semblance of democracy and equality was observed on pirate ships. Moreover, pirate ships of that time could be called a model of tolerance. 30, 40, 50, or even 60% of the crew at that time were black. The reason is simple. Pirates often captured slave ships. The most horrendous living conditions were on such ships, both for the sailors and the slaves they transported. Rare logbooks from 18th-century slave ships have survived. From them, we learn that on almost every day of a voyage on such a ship, someone died. The bodies of slaves were simply thrown overboard. It's understandable why sailors and slaves gladly joined the pirates. Because of the multinational composition, authorities often called pirates villains of all nations. There were also many gay men among pirates. In closed environments like a ship, where the vast majority of the crew is male, homosexual expressions were not uncommon. But on merchant or naval ships, there was strict discipline, and such things were forbidden. On pirate ships, there was significantly more freedom and fewer restrictions. Those pirates who preferred women could theoretically find a wife who would patiently wait for their return from a voyage, but such stories were rare. Besides, it was advantageous for captains to have sailors in their crew with nothing holding them on shore. Mostly, pirates were content with casual encounters on land, and sometimes they found a woman among their colleagues. Yes, there were women among them. Most often, they got on a pirate ship by dressing in men's clothing. It was possible to keep their gender a secret because pirates didn't change clothes very often during a voyage. Imagine what it smelled like in the quarters below deck. But that's not what we're talking about now. In short, women who proved themselves as good sailors could later make a kind of coming out. Yes, there were few female pirates, but some of them managed to leave their names in history. And Bonnie and Mary Red are the most famous female pirates of the Golden Decade. The first became a pirate by starting a romance with one and running away from home. The second joined the pirates when the ship she was serving on as a sailor was captured. Both women earned a reputation as desperate pirates, in no way inferior to, and often surpassing, their male colleagues. Both were caught in 1720 and, like all pirates, sentenced to be hanged by a British court. But Anne and Mary used a loophole in the law. Both turned out to be pregnant at the time, and the law forbade hanging women who were carrying a child until after they gave birth. They were sent to prison. Mary Red died there of a fever, while Bonnie disappeared without a trace. Her fate is unknown. According to some reports, she managed to escape and live to a ripe old age. Another superstar of that decade was the pirate known to everyone by the nickname Blackbeard. Just look at the engraving of him. The beard, the pose. Does it remind you of anyone? It was Blackbeard who was one of the prototypes for Captain Jack Sparrow. His real name was Edward Teach. This dude was a true king of performance. First of all, he was very tall, 1.8 meters, about 5 feet 11 inches. Doesn't seem like much, right? But that's today. Back then, the average height of a man was 1.50 to 1.60 meters, 50-inch-5'3". Before capturing another ship, Edward Teach would stuff his beard and hair with a special flammable powder, something like what's used today to make sparklers. He would light it all and board the enemy ship. With his entire appearance, Blackbeard communicated to the enemy, "I am your worst nightmare. Surrender or die." Interestingly, Blackbeard was not the most successful pirate of the Golden Decade in terms of the number of captured ships. He was far behind Bartholomew Roberts. But he had charisma. Thanks to it, over the last centuries, Blackbeard has appeared in a huge number of artistic works, from books to TV series and video games. Blackbeard, like other pirates, used another method of intimidating enemies, the black flag. Everyone on the planet knows that the black flag with a skull and crossbones is the symbol of pirates. But it appeared precisely in that decade, from 1716 to 1726. One version of the origin of this symbol is this. On merchant or naval ships, the captain always kept a logbook where he recorded all important events during the voyage, including information about sailors' deaths, which, as we found out, was not a rarity. The entry about a sailor's death was short. The sailor's name was written, and next to it, 2 bones and a skull were drawn, the sign of death. So, in a way, the 2 bones and skull on the black flag were a metaphor for the sailor's death when he joined a pirate ship. And for the pirate's opponents, it was the same powerful message: surrender or die. Pirates were not always humane and kind to their opponents. Yes, many would release captured ships along with their crews after taking everything of value. There were many stories in the newspapers of that time from people who had been held captive by pirates. But there were also captains who brutally killed their prisoners. By the way, the skull and crossbones was far from the only design for a pirate flag. There were several dozen. Each pirate ship chose its own design, but they all had recurring symbols: a skull, a skeleton, bones, sabers. Another important detail found on many flags was the hourglass. It symbolized limited time. Pirates understood that their life was very short, no longer than that of an ordinary sailor of the time, and possibly even shorter. The authorities of various countries actively hunted down pirates and executed them. Diseases and serious injuries were a common routine. That's why the image of a pirate often includes a wooden leg, a hook for a hand, or an eye patch. There's a theory that pirates might have used these eye patches to adapt their vision when moving from the brightly lit deck to the dark spaces inside the ship. That is, they would simply remove the patch and could see in the dark immediately without wasting time on adaptation. And it really works. Just try it at home. Close one eye for just a minute while in a brightly lit room. Then go into a dark room. First, look around with the eye that was open. Then open the second eye and you will see many more details. So yes, this theory is plausible. But most likely, for most pirates, the eye patch was the result of an injury, and here's why. Just imagine an attack between two ships. The vessels approach side by side and start firing their cannons. A cannonball at enormous speed smashes into the wooden hull of the ship. Sharp splinters of various sizes fly everywhere and, among other things, hit the bodies of those on board. This quite explains why many pirates had maiming injuries. And yet, despite all the drawbacks, many sailors became pirates. Fully understanding that their life was short and dangerous, they chose freedom. So, perhaps this is the main reason why for centuries to come, it was these pirates, the pirates of this specific decade, who became such major symbols. It was true rock and roll, and the pirates of this time were real rock stars. They challenged the system. They lived as they wanted. They established a semblance of democracy on their ships. They died young and free. That is, the poor admired them, while the aristocracy tried to suppress and destroy them. This is precisely why buried pirate treasure is nothing more than a myth. Firstly, there is no documentary evidence for it, and secondly, what's the point of accumulating wealth if your life is short anyway? Therefore, pirates tried to spend everything when they went ashore after a voyage. The authorities of various countries didn't sit idly by either. Their actions to capture pirates yielded results. The Golden Age quickly came to an end, and by the mid-1720s, most of the famous pirates had been killed or executed. It was then that a crucial book was published, titled A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates. It was in this book that the lives of the most significant pirates of the Golden Age were first described in detail. Subsequently, this work was used by many writers, screenwriters, and other creative professionals, which, of course, influenced how they depicted pirates in their books and films. And from there, the typical image of a pirate made its way directly into our minds, right from childhood. So that's the story. Major respect if you've watched the video to this point. Subscribe to the channel, I'll make something else interesting, and I'll see you in the next video.